Well, this has been a week, and I don't know where to start, but I do know where to start.
Well, certainly better than me then. So let's go for it.
So as we record, 1 week ago, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, and there were a number of other decisions that were made, but like the one that's getting the most attention is the overturning of Roe versus Wade, nearly 50 years after after the decision was made by the Supreme Court to in favor of a federal level access to abortion for women, has now been overturned 6-3 by the Supreme Court. And obviously that feels like there's a number of feelings, and I want to like specifically say these are the feelings, because this is feelings are, and they once you have a feeling about something, it's now time to collect information and see how this is what the facts are. But it feels like rights have been stripped away. Like women, it feels like this is, and there's a lot of supporting evidence that this is just to control women's bodies. It is to there is a racial element to this, but it feels like a control issue and not what is touted as a protection of the unborn.
Yeah. So interestingly, I think I've mentioned it on the show. I know I've mentioned it to you in general, but like I don't typically get on social media like that. Sure, you'll see posts from me, and it's almost always fed from posting on Instagram and just letting it cross-post, right? That kind of thing. And so I spent a little bit of time on social media abnormally over the past week. And I actually elected to engage with someone that I knew I had no reason to, and it stayed civil enough. But this is the kind of where I'm going with this is there's a very staunch mindset in what I'm assuming to be a very vocal minority that cannot apparently look at the procedure of having an abortion as anything other than murdering a child, no matter what type of evidence to the contrary. And it baffles me to an extent, but at the same time, I try to be somewhat objective about the terminology and say, if you truly believe that a human being's life begins at conception, can I say that your belief is wrong necessarily if you do truly wholeheartedly believe it, right? We can point to reasons why that's a illogical belief,
Mm-hmm.
and that's separate. Right. And that's where I'm trying to kind of be careful with it, because this person didn't attack my statements, and I want to make sure I don't attack theirs as well. And there was a somewhat civil level of discourse, but it struck me as baffling that the only way this person could view abortion was the murder of a person.
Yeah,
partially because I don't understand it, right? But at the same time, it's such an extremist view that's the problem,
right. And to talk about the illogical part, I think we've talked on the show about the illogical part of that particular position. And aside from that, if that is your position, this banning abortion does not. It's a partial. Like it's not a well-rounded position.
It's a very incomplete response.
Yes, exactly. I think incomplete response is a great way of describing that. Because I also have engaged with somebody, like a high school friend of mine. I have engaged in conversation with him about it. And he brought up something that I found really interesting. And he said, the overturning of Roe versus Wade does not ban any abortion. And it's true. However, it allows states to ban abortions. And that is becoming problematic. It's allowing states to in some states, the changes, and it feels like it's a fracturing of the United States. The states are not united on this position, and we now have a fracturing in the population in this country over who has this right and who doesn't. And a lot of the state level, the state legislation on abortion is incredibly, I'll call it barbaric, to not make any exceptions for the protection of the life of the mother, for rape and incest victims. This is truly backwards. That's even a small part of, like, it doesn't, those things, the woman's body should be hers to choose with what to do, and we're not even, that's to me where the biggest issue is. But we don't even have allowances for these obvious, they're fringe cases, but very specific fringe cases that and even those instances, the access to abortion is not available. And also, if you live in a particular state and you go to another state where it is legal, you can be convicted of a crime based on actions that you did outside of the state that you live in. That blows my mind.
So I was going to bring this up, but so I'm glad you did. The provisions for specific cases, right? And this is where I have issues with the mindset I was talking about earlier as well. For that particular mindset where abortion should never be a choice, never be an option, you're literally saying that you would rather a woman suffer with, like in the case of sexual assault, a child she absolutely did not want, that is just a reminder of that trauma, bring that pregnancy full term just because you think that child's life is more important than allowing the mother to choose not to bring that child into the world. The trauma, the sheer emotional and mental damage that causes has to be worse than the loss of a particular child that may or may not have been harmful to society. Like the argument up to that point, it seems to be that you don't know whether that child could be the greatest thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. You shouldn't prejudge it, is the argument. But that's missing the mark and completely, because you have a person who was subject to a crime having to pay in many, many different ways for being a victim. And you're saying that you also have to bring this unwanted child to term and then either raise it or put it up for adoption.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, putting it up for adoption. That doesn't feel like a great option.
It's not. Like
in its current state, as it exists, it does not feel like a great option at all. It feels like a bad option. And then it's funny. One of the people I follow on TikTok are the Good Liars, and they've gone to abortion protests, like where people are protesting outside of Planned Parenthood, and they have signs that say adoption, and they start interviewing them and say, how many children have you adopted? Oh, none of them. Nobody there has adopted a child. They're telling people to like put their child up for adoption, yet they're not willing to adopt children of their own.
Well, and I didn't look up the statistics. I should have, but how many end up aging out of foster care without ever being adopted?
Right. I have a good friend of mine. She was adopted, and actually two good friends of mine that were adopted, and they're like, I'm adopted, but I'm pro-choice. And they both had great experiences through adoption. But you also hear about horror stories through an adoption. And it to the extent of like, if I don't believe that the unborn child, the fetus, the embryo that's in my body is a human person, which every other law in our government reflect that it's not a person, then it's just not a thing that I don't want to have somebody out there wondering why I gave them up. You know, I don't want somebody out, like, if it's a nothing thing, if it's, you know, it's not a person, why go through with it? Like that. The thing is, that should be a choice available, because again, no other law in this country reflects that an unborn child is a human person. They don't have a social security number. You can't get insurance policy on them. You don't pay taxes on them. They don't affect you in any other way until they are outside and wireless. I love that. There was a great ad, AT&T ad, where they showed the umbilical cord being cut, and it was like, we were meant to be wireless. So until you're wireless, you're not considered by the state as a human person. And you know what? I get that. We have to draw, you know, even though developmentally, the minute before a woman goes into labor, you know, you're this unborn child. We have to draw a hard line somewhere and make decisions. And I loved Pete Buttigieg's position on this, and it is that I leave the decision up to the mother because it's her body and it's her baby. And if somebody needs to perform a late-term abortion, it's probably a major deal. And, you know, the whole, like, the late-term abortion thing is, again, it's a fringe case. It's very much like incest and rape, where these are like less than 1% of abortions. But a woman who has carried to term a pregnancy, who needs to who decides they need to terminate it, it's probably the best of two terrible decisions. Because it's like, at that point in time, you've got a nursery in place, you've got a baby's name, you have all these things where you've planned to become a parent to this child, and something has probably gone horribly wrong. And so, like, this sort of nuance does not exist in the mind of a pro, you know, in the minds of the people that I've spoken to that are pro-life.
Yeah, not at all. And it's a very binary issue for them. And this has been something that I've noticed with every pro-life argument, is it's always a lack of acceptance of any gray area. You know, it's very much a binary issue, and that's simply not reality. The only thing that I could say that I would want to, or not even want, like, my position on it is that it's the woman's body. It should be her choice. The only argument I can make for that not being just clear-cut, that be the answer, would be if two people are in a recognized relationship, one wants to terminate, one does not, I can understand there being something around that to also have some level of protection for a father who maybe doesn't agree with it but can't stop it necessarily. And that's a really difficult subject to tackle. Because,
yeah, again, it's the fringe.
Right. And I don't think that's a scenario that's very likely in the first place. I mean, statistically, I'm sure it's in the same realm of late-term abortions, if not even less likely. The biggest problem there is if you do make this wrapper around a recognized relationship, where do you draw that line? Does it only apply to married couples, or does it apply to engaged couples, or like X amount of time? Like there's so much that opens the door to that can also be problematic and can be used as a way to exert control unintentionally yet legally from the law's perspective.
Yeah, no, I know. And, it's interesting. It's like, I know more than one person who has gone through a divorce and their partner was pregnant at the time of getting a divorce. And that would seem like the most likely case where you might want to terminate a pregnancy that you weren't initially expecting to terminate. I'm just throwing that out as an example.
Right.
And maybe that has happened. And again, I feel like, this is where you would leave this to the decision of the mother, because it's her body. And, it's one of those things where it's like, you get married to a person and then you have decided that it's no longer feasible to stay married. And let's say you're in the middle of a pregnancy and it's just like, well, you as a man, I feel like I really don't have an option to mandate that the child be terminated or the pregnancy kept to term, because it's not my choice anymore. Like, as much as like someone may not want to be getting a divorce, if somebody, if one person decides the relationship is over, that's it. You don't get a choice. If one person wants the relationship to be over and the other person doesn't, you don't get a choice. And I feel like that's the same way if if the mother of the child, if the pregnant woman decides she no longer wants to have that pregnancy, you don't really get a choice as a man. Like, your choice is over once you've inseminated. Like, that's your choice is at that moment where you choose to, proceed or not proceed. And then you know that for the next 9 months, the person that you're with could change her mind, and that's it. And you don't really have a say. So, I mean, I feel like, it's like, obviously there's like other relationship breakdowns where that happens, but I feel like as a married couple, married couples make decisions together all of the time, like big decisions, little decisions. And one would hopefully, decide that, they can make those decisions together, but this might be a decision where that breaks up a couple. And it's like you realize, hey, our values are no longer the same. So regardless of relationship status of any sort, I really feel like it's still the woman's choice.
Yeah, and it goes back to where it's difficult to make a case otherwise, especially when you, myself as well, feel that it's that person's choice exclusively.
Yeah.
The only reason I even wanted to mention it is because I can see that being a worthwhile debate to have in the wake of what the argument against access to abortion is, if you were actually looking for a legitimate argument. The problem is the arguments are not legitimate.
Right. So the other thing that I have been feeling since last Friday's decision is that this feels like it is a clear violation of the separation of church and state, because the position, as a secular government, we have decided in every other, like I've said, we've decided in every other way and every other law that this is not a recognized person by the state. It feels like the motivation to overturn federal protection of right to access to abortion is certainly supported and fueled by evangelicals. I know evangelicals that are pro-choice. I don't know any pro-life people that hold the pro-life position that are not evangelicals. I'm sure there are some, but the driving force is from evangelicals and evangelical or even representatives who are trying to garner the evangelical vote, even though they may not be themselves. One example might be Donald Trump. He's certainly not an evangelical, but the evangelicals are in his voter base. And so I don't want to say he's placating to them, but to garner their vote, he said, this is what I will do to get your vote. And for many evangelicals, they are this is the one moral issue for them that they will cast their vote for the pro-life candidate, whether or not that, for the past 50 years, we haven't had any, or the past 42 years, we have had pro-life candidates, because that's in 1980 election is when they first made this an issue. And not a single one of them have done anything about it until Trump came into office, and he put a three conservative leaning justices on it, and that's how this got overturned. So there are people who are using the belief system of others to enforce a law that feels like a violation of church and state.
Well, it goes a step further. The one of the other cases that the Supreme Court ruled on was in favor of a coach who would, after a football game, would kneel at the half-line mark on the field and pray. Did you see that ruling?
I did see that ruling.
So in this case, it was a coach who did not necessarily require or request that anybody join him. What he was doing was, after every football match, he would go out onto the field, kneel, pray. And after, I think they said it was like 12 years of doing so, someone complained or something. I don't remember the full backstory. But initially, as the case progressed, what brought the case about in the first place was that the school district terminated his employment because of the idea of separating religious practices from school events. And the Supreme Court heard the case, and they ruled in favor of the coach. And it's the same type of argument.
Right. I have trouble with this one. I have more trouble with this one, though. Because if he's not requiring, like if he's doing it by himself publicly, or if people know what he's doing and they choose to join him, I feel like that is okay. But see, and let me reiterate, I'm talking about feelings and not facts right now. So
right. Yeah,
I just want to make sure, I just want to remind our listeners, I'm talking about feelings and not facts. But that feels okay. The concern is, though, that I don't understand, I don't know what and why or where the complaint came from. Because there might be he could legitimately be infringing on someone else's rights. I get that. But also, if somebody just complains, I don't like that he prays at the football games publicly, I feel like that would be, and he gets fired, I feel like that's an infringement upon his rights to worship as he chooses freely.
So there are two things to it that I don't know if this helps or just makes it cloudier. One of the things that I did read was that because of the timing being immediately after the game, walking out into the middle of the field, that there was, even if it was not intended, there was pressure to join. And I could see that being a potential argument for at least restricting where it can be. Maybe it's fine to do so on the sideline, but it's not fine to walk out into the middle of the field and do so.
Well, you can be guaranteed if he was Islamic and he took out a rug and pointed it toward Mecca, he would have been fired. It would have happened one time and he would have been fired.
Yeah, that's the part of it that does bother me, and it's part of why I can say, or I could see ruling in the coach's favor, because what little bit I know of it certainly did not sound like it was in any way something that should be restricted, especially not if it was allowed for X number of years and then finally got the attention of someone that maybe it shouldn't. But at the same time, the moment of silence as opposed to the Pledge of Allegiance or moment of prayer or whatever you want to, however you want to refer to it, back in was that through the 90s where they changed?
I remember the moments of. I remember even I think it might have even been in the late 80s where we had moments of silence. But I definitely in the early 90s there was a moment of silence.
Yeah, and all I'm getting at there is that there was a clear delineation of, instead of starting the day with the Pledge of Allegiance or a morning prayer is very much this is a moment to reflect. You can do whatever you want. And most of the arguments around that revolved around maintaining the separation of church and state. But I get that that's different as well because that's during school time.
Right.
So if the concern is that it's during the school event, then maybe that's part of where it's problematic. But at the same time, I don't know of anybody that can't just stop wherever they are in the middle of the day and to themselves say a prayer.
Well, that's the thing. So my recollection from having been in a Protestant church, evangelical church, is that I should be allowed to express my beliefs anywhere that I am, and there be no repercussion for that. Like the idea that I can't publicly pray as an official way in the public school. I am being persecuted. That is the attitude. That is what was taught. That is what was believed in my particular circles when I was religious, and that was like everybody that I knew that was religious. And we're talking about over the course of my growing up as a child and through all my formative years and into young adulthood. This is thousands of people that I meet, and anyone who's expressed it or was around it, that it was agreed upon. Nobody ever sort of dissented that like this is not a position that I have. There was like contemporary Christian music that I listened to that was about this exact topic. It was about trying to bring prayer back into school, and it was widespread. And so we're talking about thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people that subscribe to this belief. And that's simply not the case. Like, this is not an infringement upon your right. If you're not allowed to pray silently or not allowed to believe a certain way, yes. But to be recognized in an official way is an infringement upon anyone who does not believe the way you believe.
Right. And I'm wondering, and as we're talking through it, I'm wondering if I recall correctly, the coach was praying out loud. And I'm wondering if that's not where the potential problem comes from.
It could be.
Because my initial thought upon seeing the ruling was like that seems like it could open the door to other problematic things. And I wasn't entirely sure why. But as we kind of talk through it, if it was verbal, then what's going to happen when someone prays to an Egyptian god verbally in a mostly Protestant school? Because the rights that were just sided with at the Supreme Court level would protect that as well.
Right.
Same thing if someone decided they wanted to make people uncomfortable and pray to Satan, or you name it, come up with a fictional god and pray. Like, all of those things would be protected by this particular ruling.
There's a Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
I'm pretty sure there are very, very large number of fictional churches as well.
Yeah, there's one version of the Satanic Church that is their point, is to like recognize the bias of our government towards Christianity. And again, I don't think Christians shouldn't have the right to do these things. It's just that they don't have the right to do these things unfairly.
Well, I was going to say exclusively, because that's really what it comes down to. If you listen to any, we'll continue with the evangelical term, but if you listen to that group, it's all about bringing God into the country again, or politics, or the conversation, or schools, or government. Like, it's never an acceptance of any other religious belief. It's always very specifically make the United States a Christian nation.
Right. So I alluded to there being a racial aspect to this, and there have been some theories or hypotheses that have been put forward that as the country's population grows and through the course of events, white people will become a minority. And I think we're close to it there. And there's this idea, again, a hypothesis that if white women are forced to carry their babies to term, it'll help slow that change and making white people the minority. It's an interesting hypothesis. I don't think it is entirely without merit, but it's extreme. But
it sounds like a component of the Great Replacement theory.
Right. But then there's also that.
Real quick, I just have to interject because this bugged me. I don't understand why it's called the Great Replacement theory. There's nothing great about it. Where did that come from? Anyway, proceed.
Well, there's this aspect of it, and then there is the. Sorry, my train of thought got a little bit derailed.
I'm sorry. The whole putting great in front of anything like that, like my guess is the concept being great from the standpoint of massive, large, big, not good or anything to that extent. But
size, not quantity, not quality.
Right. But it bugs me every time I hear it. Like, why don't we just call it replacement theory and can add on that it's, in parentheses, it's bullshit and keep going.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah, I think I completely derailed that.
I'm further derailed, yeah.
So you can continue thinking about it. I want to add in here that out of all of this, like there are two big things that I've been grappling with from going back to how you're talking about this is how I feel out of the things that are happening. It feels very much like it's just a group of people who have decided they have the power to make changes they want to make, and consequences be damned. That's just kind of how all of the different rulings have felt over the past week and a half.
Yes, you have re-railed me. No, that
Okay.
doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound appropriate. I have gotten back on track.
All right.
So what it was is that now that as we come to a place where white Christian now might be a minority or trending towards being a minority, fuck democracy. We no longer want democracy. Now that people of color can have a bigger sway because white Christians are no longer the majority. You don't get democracy. Fuck democracy. We're going to do what we want to do because we have the power right now. We're going to hold on to the power, and we want a theocracy. There's like Josh Hawley from Missouri, senator from Missouri, has openly stated he wants he wants the United States to be a theocracy. That's like these rulings are like indicate that is the direction they're going. And Clarence Thomas has come out and said they basically have crosshairs on same-sex marriage, same-sex relations.
Contraception.
Did he say anything about quote-unquote interracial
No,
relations?
of course not, because that would target
Because
himself.
he's married to a white woman, yes.
Huh.
So, but that's conceivable with what they're doing.
So I wouldn't even just say it's conceivable. I would say that they've indicated that unless something changes, that's coming.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of somebody bringing the court a case that has merit, or that seems to have merit.
And then the Democratic response has been abysmal at best. We have too few parties in this country, and this is why we're here. We can go all the way back to the writings of George Washington, and he said a two-party system is a problem. It's a big problem, and we've never heeded that advice, and it's going to continue to be a problem.
It's interesting there have been a lot of things, if you think about the Founding Fathers in general, that have been interesting to think about in the light of both the Supreme Court rulings and the January 6th committee hearings. Washington, of course, warned about the two-party system. Jefferson warned about the shortcomings of a democracy, with the subjects of the democracy not being well informed. And we're seeing the culmination of all of those things play out in real time, week by week.
Indeed, we are.
I'm gonna have to take this as a takeaway to go research. There was someone else that specifically called out that democracy was destined to fail as well, which, based on historical trends, no democracy has ever lasted as long as we have, right? So, I mean, we're doing better than projected anyway.
I mean, we have a terrible system, but there's nothing better. Like that's the consensus, and that's okay because with this terrible system we have, it can become better if we work at it. And like the place where we need to start is anti-corruption laws, but the combination of anti-corruption and better education, like the people that I've been talking to have been ironically stupidly informed. Like they're I think the term I used was like the level of misinformed that you are is ironically stupid.
I feel that a lot lately. I mean, it sums it up so perfectly.
Yeah, but one thing I do want to I would like to say is that, and I meant to say this earlier, is even though people are misinformed in this way, they're well-meaning. But there's this great saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
There are a couple of interesting ways to think about that, because what truly defines well-meaning with regard to some of these topics? And the reason I ask that is because you can be a well-meaning person for advocating your views, but that doesn't mean it's well-meaning for anybody else. And your lack of willing to hear counters to your well-meaning definitions kind of renders you not well-meaning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You're like I'm taking this broad stroke comment and trying to be gracious and understanding of people that hold a particular view that I think is wrong because it's misinformed. And I'm trying to be gracious as to what their motives are. Like I think the political motives of overturning Roe versus Wade are about control, and I think there's nothing good with the political motives. But I think the people who legitimately hold a pro-life position think that they are protecting children. They are protecting the unborn and the innocent. Well, on a previous show, I read the statement about how it's so easy to advocate for the unborn because they want nothing from you. And then, there are other programs that are available that would, banning abortion doesn't really do a great job of banning abortion. Like it will it will reduce the abortion rate in some places, but that's not how you stop people. That's not the best way and the most effective way to lower the abortion rate. Like education, access to contraceptives, appropriate sex education, the wage, addressing the wage gap,
family planning resources,
family planning resources, access to better maternal and paternal leave, access to health care, access to child care. All of those things will reduce the abortion rate. They've shown to reduce abortion rate, not saying you can't have one.
And interestingly enough, increase positive outcomes across the board for those affected.
Right. It affects people it has a positive effect on people who can't even get pregnant, or who don't want to get pregnant, who don't get pregnant. It's a win-win. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.